Now this was, in my opinion, 15 years ago, the best sound card out there. But is it still any good? Let's find out in this video. So, I can almost hear you say, oh come on, until not yet another video about an Audigy sound card. Well, I'm sorry, I'm going to do another one, and it is the Audigy 2 this time. 15-20 years ago when I bought this sound card, I thought it was the bomb. It was the best sounding sound card I ever had. Now, if you compare it to the onboard sound solutions you had 20 years ago, well, it's not much of a surprise that this is a good sound card, because back in those days the Realtek options were, well, really rubbish. So a dedicated sound card was something that you needed. And well, I bought this one, the Audigy 2, and it was, in my opinion, the best sound card ever. There were of course other sound cards that were better or whatever, but with the money I had to spend back then, this was absolutely the bomb. Now the Audigy 2 was released back in 2002 and had an updated processor on it, and this time it is the EMU 10K 2.5, and this was basically just an updated processor from its predecessor, which was basically just a 16-bit digital signal processor. And well, they put a big label on it and they said it was a 24-bit sound card, but basically it was just 16-bit with a 24-bit digital to analog converter on it. Now they updated this sound card to be truly from front to the end in 24 bits. Now they did that by adding another processor on it, but thus bypassing the regular digital signal processor in order to make it 24 bits. Now it isn't the best solution, and it isn't, well, the most beautiful solution, just update the complete digital signal processor in my opinion, but that isn't what they did. They slapped on another processor, which was 24 bits. It had a reported signal to noise ratio of 106 decibels, which was, well, fairly good for those days, because most onboard solutions were in the 80s, 90s signal to noise ratio. I'm going to talk a bit about the stats later on, but first let's head over to the specifications. And this is the updated processor here, called the CA0102IAT, but it is generally known as the EMU 10K 2.5, and it was designed back in 2001. The previous version was the EMU 10K1 and was used in the Live series sound cards, and the 10K2 was used in the Audigy. And this is the additional processor that I talked about, the CA0151, which is the before mentioned bypass that made this card end-to-end 24 bits. The digital to analog converter used is the Cirrus Logic CS4382, which is supposed to have a 114 decibels dynamic range. My results showed something else, but I'll get back to that a bit later on. It sports 24 bits, and it is 192 kHz resolution and has 8 channels it can DA convert. The card is PCI and does not require a separate power connector. The card has a line in, a mic input, and 3 jack blocks, so 6 speakers, thus 5.1, can be attached, and it has a cool firewire connector. All plugs are gold plated, or at least something that is supposed to be gold plated. Now I wanted to tell you something about the drivers for this sound card. Although they are still available on Creative website, there is a bit of a catch there. And we have to go back in time for this, because, well, before Windows Vista, sound cards could, well, address the whole system and even relieve the CPU of calculations regarding sound. After Vista, that wasn't possible anymore. Sound cards were just, well, glorified digital to analog converters, and well, that's all they basically did. Now, it may seem that Microsoft is the big bully here, but that wasn't the case. The case was that Creative and all the other sound card manufacturers released really crappy drivers, even so bad that they were the cause of the most blue screens of death, and well, that's something that you don't want to have. And to create a more stable operating system, Microsoft said, well, that's it, we're going to kill off the complete driver system that Windows 7, all previous versions have. We're going to kill all those drivers, and we're going to do it our way, I'm not Microsoft. We're going to do it our way, and everything has to be done by the CPU. And the only thing that a sound card has to do, well, is just convert the sound from digital to analog. And well, that's what sound cards are these days, but also made it impossible for EAX 4.1, which needed a direct link to the CPU, and also all kinds of other options the regular sound card had. Also, drivers were sort of incompatible. There were some hiccups here and there. Some may work, some may not work, but most cards, well, had some issues with drivers. Now what Creative did, well, they didn't update their drivers to the newer version for Vista or Windows 8 or even Windows 10. What they did, well, they said, we're not going to update them, and we're going to, well, force people to buy new sound cards and to get the updated drivers. And well, there were some people out there that weren't too happy with that, mainly DanielK, who just modded the drivers and so it could be run on a Windows 10 machine. And that's exactly what he did. A lot of people were happy because they could use their old hardware now and didn't have to buy anything new. Well, Creative saw that and they weren't too happy about that either, because first Microsoft killed off, well, basically the whole sound card business, and then DanielK comes along and they killed any future sales. Well, they weren't too happy about it and they did a lawsuit against DanielK. Well, the whole community, the sound card community, wasn't too happy with Creative, and in the end, well, they sort of settled it out of court. And what happened was that DanielK still produces modded drivers with a big disclaimer on it. These are not Microsoft's drivers and everything, and if you want to use Dolby or DTS, you have to buy a license and everything. Well, that's what happened, and that's exactly what I did. I installed the DanielK drivers, even though the drivers on Creative sort of worked. Now here you can set the speakers or headphones. Now I mainly use headphones, so you can select those here, and depending on what you choose, you can choose the bass management or bass boost. Now I don't use any of them because I think they're crap, but you can still use them if you want to. And you can also enable the equalizer here, and you have several presets. Now you also have the EAX console for advanced HD sound. Now the interesting thing about this is that, well, EAX isn't used anymore, so you can enable them, well, what you like, but still it isn't used. Also, you can see the idiotic environmental settings like the bathroom, cathedral, the chapel, church, whatever. Whoever uses this kind of functionality is an idiot. You can also have some karaoke and the CMS S3D. Now I did a test about this with Rightmark Audio Analyzer, so I'll get back to this a bit later on. And this is the Sound Blaster Audigy control panel. Now it's interesting to see that this control panel is used because in the previous drivers, or let's say the original drivers, this was not included. This is a control panel interface that looks like it was used for, well, more modern sound cards. So it's interesting to see that it's here. Now you can select your online karaoke, your speaker settings and your digital output. Again, EAX, CMS S3D. This option doesn't work with my Audigy. Some device information, and of course the restore defaults. And last but not least, the audio console. The device information, you can also set your headphones here, EAX, CMS S3D, the decoder, which one you would like to use, again online karaoke, restore defaults, the bit accuracy and the SPDIF. Now the audio console has all functionality that the other components, well, give you individually, but the audio console gives you all of them in one simple, well, control panel. So I did a listening session with this sound card, and well, let's get down to the chase. It was meh. It was my first impression. Meh. In my memories, of course, this was the best sound card out there. In my memories, it was vibrant, it was bassy, and it had a lot of power and everything in it. But now when I started to listen to it, and after some time, I had the feeling it was holding back something. It was like having a car driving 50 kilometers an hour over a 100 kilometers an hour highway. In my memories, it could achieve a lot more. It was a middle-class car, but I think 20 years later, almost 20 years later, it isn't a middle class anymore. It's just a ye olden car that can produce sound. It did have a really characteristic sound, difficult word, to it. It was very recognizable to me. And it was pleasant to hear that sound again. It took me back to, well, 20 years ago when I was just a young lad with a beard. But still, these days, meh. The results from Rightmark Audio Analyzer are good, nothing more and nothing less. The frequency response starts off great at the lower frequencies, but as it passes beyond 3 kHz it starts to drop. This means that when gaming or listening to music, some of the higher frequencies will be a bit more quiet. There is of course that strange pointing thing just beyond 10 kHz, a little horn. As said before, the datasheet by Cirrus Logic says it has 114 decibels dynamic range. My measurement is a lot lower. I only got 78.7 decibels. Now, these are the results for the complete card, not just the DA converter, so I think a lot more is going on there. The noise level and the dynamic range are average. The total harmonic distortion is very respectable. I have seen more modern sound cards that have a worse rating. The other items on the list are good. So it's not a bad sound card, but these days I rarely see one that gets an average rating. Now, just for the fun of it, I compared it to a modern codec, this time the ALC892. Of course, it isn't really a match, but it's nice to see how much audio has evolved these last 10 to 20 years. The ALC892 scores better in nearly every department. There is a bit of a flaw that the Audigy 2 does not have. When we look at the frequency response graph, you will see that there's a discrepancy between the green and the white line. That means that the channels, well, the right is just a tad louder than the left. But that is something that a lot of Realtek codecs suffer from. Now, it was never my intention to use this as my everyday sound card. It was just a fun project to see where we came from all those years ago. And well, you could definitely tell that it isn't up to today's standards anymore. I mean, you could get a Realtek onboard solution these days on a regular motherboard that's better than this one. But still, it was a nice project just to get it here, to hear it again and get it working. And for that, we all need to thank DanielK. Not just me, but I think everyone, because he made sure that a lot of sound cards got a second life and weren't killed by Windows Vista or every Windows after that. And well, a bit of a shame for Creative to, well, throw in a lawsuit whenever they thought they were entitled to one. I think the modding community is, well, very needed even these days. It was fun to hear this sound card again because of its characteristic sound. It may be the lack of higher frequencies or that strange little horn in the frequency response graph that I showed you. But overall, it was a nice experience. But if you're going to buy one for everyday use, don't. Get another sound card that at least is PCI based and has better driver support. Now, that's it for me for today. I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope to see you soon. Thank you now. Bye bye.